Senator, thanks so much for being here. First things first, how's your husband? Thank you. He's been fighting COVID-19.
Well, he's doing so much better. He was out of the hospital a few weeks ago after coughing up blood and having a really bad case of pneumonia, low oxygen. And one day, after about 4 or 5 days, it turned to the better. And I learned from that, Michael, one, to follow the rules. He didn't go to things even when he felt a little sick, and he actually would have exposed people at his work and other places, and he didn't. And then secondly, you can't be there. You can't hold their hand. You can't hug the healthcare workers that are taking care of them. And we all know for some of the worst cases, it's those healthcare workers that are holding up the phone when the family tries to say the last words to their loved one. It is a very horrific disease.
So Godspeed to John Bessler, and thanks for the update. Your governor just announced that he was reopening golf courses and bait shops, outdoor shooting ranges, marina services, where people are supposed to adhere to proper distancing and other measures meant to stop community spread. But like other states, Minnesota doesn't have enough testing, the tracking capacity yet to figure out where things stand. What reservations, if any, do you have about that move?
Well, I trust what our governor is doing here. He cares so much about the people of Minnesota. His name's Tim Walz. He was in Congress, a veteran, and there's a lot of faith in what he's doing. Everyone is not going to be happy with everything these governors do. I think it was Andrew Cuomo who said, sure, I know I'm not making you happy. If you're mad, call me. You know what? Does the President of the United States say that? No. He starts out his political career at the Republican convention by saying, I alone know how to fix this. Then the next thing you know, when we have a crisis, he says he's back up to the governors. Then he flips the other way and says he's in charge, and now he says, which is correct under the Constitution, that it's up to the governors. I think it's okay that we have different governors making different decisions in different states. But let me tell you what isn't okay, and that is that there was never a national strategy for testing, and there was never a national strategy to prepare our country. This is a global pandemic, a national pandemic. And if we had not lost those precious months when Donald Trump was worrying about his rallies and other things, we could have been in a better shape right now for the testing. And then that would have helped governors, it would have helped businesses, everyone to gradually reopen. Because if you have the testing, as we've seen around the world, you're in a much better place to control those hot spots. And especially when we start seeing drugs and other things and promising therapies, you want to be able to know where the hot spots are and immediately attack them.
I'm worried about our election. What went on in Wisconsin a week ago was a bit of a cluster. How do we ensure that doesn't happen nationally in November?
That answer is more straightforward, Michael. That answer is about making it safe for people to vote so they don't have to choose between their health and voting. I will never forget that image, and I don't think any American will, of those people in Wisconsin bravely asserting their right to vote in garbage bags and masks when it didn't have to happen. And one of the most interesting things in that case was the voters voted. A lot voted by mail, and that is your answer. Make it easier for people to vote by mail, and that's the bill I lead with Ron Wyden. We got $400 million. We need much more to make this big scale for the country. And you see Republican governors, Republican secretaries of state rolling this out all over the country. They need the funding because you're going to have postage, envelopes, new workers, and at the same time making sure our polls can be open 20 days in advance across the country, making the training of new poll workers a priority. All of this can happen. They just had a successful election in South Korea, despite having the pandemic there. You can do this, but you have to have a will. And I'm just excited that there's growing support across the country for this, and Wisconsin is the symbol of this should never happen again. And by the way, you know who voted by mail? Donald Trump. He requested a mail-in ballot at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So why couldn't those people in Wisconsin have the same right? Mm-hmm.
Understood. Is there not a 10th Amendment issue here? Isn't it the business of the states to determine and set their elections? Wherein lies the authority to do what you'd like to do?
Sure, it's the business of the states to have elections. That's why they have their own ballots. That's why they have their own voting equipment. There's all kinds of things. But this is a national election in the middle of a pandemic. So, number one, getting the money, no one has raised issues about that. Almost every Secretary of State wants this funding for early voting, for mail-in voting. Two, all we're doing is setting standards nationally, and think about it, 20 days early for polling locations. A lot of Republican governors are already starting to waive requirements and do that anyway. Number three, making sure that we break down some of these barriers. In 6 states, you have to get a notary or 2 witnesses in order to get a mail-in ballot. 16 states, you have to have an excuse to get a mail-in ballot, but 4 states, including 2 Republican governors, have already waived those requirements. So you're starting to see action across the country, but I think it is much easier if we at least have some minimal standards for the entire country, and that's what the bill that Senator Wyden and I have does.
There's a word that the Trump-Pence campaign is now using to describe that which you'd like to see come to fruition, harvesting. In fact, put on the screen a fundraising pitch that I've just seen where they're encouraging folks to pony up money so as to stop what Senator Klobuchar and others, we must get rid of ballot harvesting. Will you respond to the criticism that mail-in voting is at a heightened subjectivity to fraud?
You know what? Maybe President Trump should ask some of his own Republican officials, such as the Republican Secretary of State in Washington State, who has made it very clear that this is a safe way to vote. And in fact, you have paper ballots when you vote by mail, something we don't have in a few of our states right now. Ask the governors, Republican governors in Maryland and in New Hampshire and in Ohio that want to transform their elections into mail-in ballots. I don't think he's attuned. I think he's using it to raise money from his base. But when he does that, he's messing with people's health. And I think the best answer is how those people in Wisconsin voted in that judge's race. They were mad. They saw through it. They saw that the Republican legislature was not just messing around politically with their right to vote. They were literally putting their lives at risk. And look what happened. So I think there's going to be a huge backlash if they don't help us with the funding for this.
I think that there's a perception on the Republican side of the aisle that this benefits Democratic candidates, but the data, when you delve into it, is much more complicated than that, and it's not a clear answer.
You know what the mail ballot states are that have like over 90%, over 85%? States like Utah. That is not exactly a blue state, although we're doing better and better there. States like Arizona has actually a high rate, not the highest, but a very high rate of people voting by mail. Colorado, which is a purple state, they have nearly all voting by mail. Now, let me make clear, you still want to have polls open for people with disabilities, for people that maybe forget to get their ballot in. There's all kinds of things. But the less people you have congregating at the polls, the better off we all are.
Senator Klobuchar, Senator Warren was asked a direct question this week, and she gave a very direct answer, which is, if asked, would you accept a position on Vice President Biden's ticket? What's your answer to that same question?
My answer has been the same from the very beginning, which is right now I am focused on my state. I am focused on our country, leading the effort so that we can vote in November. And I'm just not going to engage in hypotheticals. And I know one thing for sure. Joe Biden was a great vice president. He knows what it takes to be a good vice president. He's going to make that decision.
I'll put that down as a maybe. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.